Chapter 7. Notable Proponents. Deep dive into 2 to 3 famous followers who expanded the theory. Heraclitus left the world with a single, provocative image. Everything flows, yet nothing truly dissolves into nothing. The great puzzle of change, Panta began as a fragmentary intuition in the dark corridors of early Greek thought. But as later philosophers took up his banner, his insight grew from a sharp razor of perception into a robust scaffold for a living, breathing philosophy. This chapter surveys 2 to 3 of Heraclitus's most famous followers who did the most to expand, systematize, and disseminate his theory. They did not merely echo their teacher. They reimagined the flux as a rational order, a cosmos governed by a divine or rational principle, and a human life aligned with that order. The 3 figures here, Zeno of Citium, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, form a lineage whose work transformed Heraclitean insight into a full-fledged school, Stoicism. 1. Zeno of Citium, From Flux to Framework. What Heraclitus began with a river and a flame, Zeno retooled into a framework for living and thinking. Zeno, born in Citium, modern Larnaca, Cyprus, in the 4th century BCE, traveled to Athens and studied with Cynic and other philosophical currents before arriving at the Painted Porch, the celebrated meeting place of the early Stoics. It is there that he began teaching in a style that would give his mentor's intuition a durable architecture. He did not dispute the insight that all is in motion. Rather, he insisted that motion and stability are properly understood only within a larger, intelligible order, what the later Stoics would name the Logos. The central move of Zeno's philosophy was to fuse Heraclitus's insistence on change with a robust concept of cosmic rationality. The flux of appearances, he argued, does not undermine a coherent order holding the universe together. The hidden order is the Logos, a rational, directing principle that pervades all things. In ancient Stoic terms, the Logos is the seed of order in the world. In human terms, it is the guide by which a thoughtful person lives in harmony with nature. If Heraclitus invited us to recognize the ever-changing river, Zeno invited us to acknowledge that the river runs within a canal cut by reason. This is also where Zeno begins the ethical turn that would define Stoicism. If the cosmos is intelligible because it is governed by the Logos, then a human being's proper life is one that aligns with that rational order. Virtue, rather than pleasure or wealth, becomes the sole good. Wisdom is not a private privilege but an acceptance of nature's design. The phrase living in accordance with nature becomes the living equivalent of keeping step with the river's course. But now one does so with clarity, not as a passive drift, but as an intentional, virtuous alignment with universal reason. Yet Zeno did not abandon Heraclitus's sense that opposites are linked and interdependent. He kept alive the idea of unity in multiplicity. The cosmos is a unity composed of many things in mutual relation. The appearance of conflict does not disprove order. Rather, it demonstrates how opposing forces contribute to a single teleological harmony. Thus, the Heraclitean insight is reinterpreted. Flux is real, but it unfolds within a rational field that makes one coherent whole possible. Zeno's work laid the groundwork for a once skeptical audience to believe that a life governed by reason could endure the storms of fortune. The new Stoic synthesis did not erase Heraclitus's flame, it redirected it. Fire remains a powerful symbol in Stoicism for energy, life, and the ever-moving flame of reason. Yet the Stoic flame now burns within the vessel of law-like order and rational providence. Impact and legacy. Zeno's synthesis created a persuasive bridge from mere observation of change to a practical ethic. His insistence that virtue is sufficient for happiness gave philosophy a concrete mission, not just to describe how things change, but to teach one how to live rightly amid that change. The idea that our internal state, our assent, our will, our understanding, could be trained to align with the Logos made Heraclitus's insight into flux into something usable, even actionable, in daily life. Zeno's contribution is thus not only interpretive but transformative. He converts a metaphysical intuition into a program for character, governance of the passions, and social conduct. 2. Cleanthes, the hymn, the Logos, and the living cosmos. If Zeno laid the groundwork, Cleanthes, the Stoic who followed him, made the first clear articulation of the Stoic theology and cosmology. Cleanthes lived roughly in the late 4th and early 3rd centuries BCE and is best known for a single work that survives best in fragments, the Hymn to Zeus. In this composition, Cleanthes attempts to personify the rational order as a divine, purposeful consciousness, the Logos, identified with Zeus in a monotheistic-like depiction of reality. Yet the poet-philosopher here is not tossing away Heraclitus's insight. He is translating it into a theologically saturated, all-encompassing image of a cosmos governed by rational will. For Cleanthes, the cosmos is not a chaotic accident but a living organism, a vast, intelligent entity whose governing principle is divine reason. This Logos orders events with necessity and benevolence, and the human task is to align oneself with this order. The flux of appearances, including pain and misfortune, is real. However, the rational structure of the universe ensures that things move in a direction that, over time, makes sense within the divine plan. In short, the thunderstorm of change still has a meaning within a larger design. This move, rooting the theory in a divine, rational governance, rescues Heraclitus's insight from a merely naturalistic interpretation and gives it a personal, almost intimate timbre. The cosmos is not a blind mechanism, but a cosmos with a mind and purpose. Cleanthes' version of Panta Rhei becomes, paradoxically, a more stable view of change. The ship of the world sails through caprice and contingency, yet it does so under a wise captain who knows the way to harbor. What is the practical upshot for a life well lived? The answer is straightforward in Stoic terms. Virtue arises when a person conforms to the divine order as revealed by the Logos. Fortitude, temperance, justice, and wisdom are not mere social virtues, but expressions of a rational alignment with the universe. The external events, illness, poverty, misfortune, do not determine one's peace of mind, one's judgment, and will do. The flux is acknowledged, but it is no longer a tyrant. It is the theater in which rational character is formed. Cleanthes, therefore, intensifies Heraclitus's share of the burden. Flux requires a frame that reconciles contingency with purpose. He also extends the conversation beyond mere metaphysical speculation. The cosmos, as a rational whole, can be known to a human mind, and that knowledge can guide ethical action. The result is a philosophy that can talk to the devout as well as the skeptic, offering a universe that is both mysterious and intelligible, both dynamic and purposeful. 3. Chrysippus, the systematizer who turned flux into logic and law. If Zeno and Cleanthes supplied the philosophical vision and the theological moorings, Chrysippus supplied the essential machinery, a rigorous logic, a detailed physics, and a comprehensive moral psychology that could bear the weight of Heraclitus's flux. Chrysippus, c. 280 to 206 BCE, is often described as the second founder of Stoicism, not because he replaced his predecessor's insights, but because he extended and systematized them to the point where Stoicism could function as a complete, teachable school. Chrysippus's most enduring achievement is the development of Stoic logic and its application to physics and ethics. He spearheaded a robust propositional logic, an enterprise that would influence later logic far beyond Stoicism. Through a network of conditional inferences and principles of truth that allowed a consistent handling of general propositions about change, cause, and necessity. In the face of a universe defined by flux, Chrysippus crafted a method for reasoning about that flux with coherence and certainty. The logic was not cold deduction, but a tool for living well within the changing world. Physically and metaphysically, Chrysippus pressed the Heraclitean insight into a pluralist system of causes, pneuma, breath or spirit, and the logos. He retained the core claim that the world is rationally governed. He explained how the divine rational principle animates and preserves the cosmos through a sort of cosmic fate or providence. The chain of causation is not arbitrary. It is rooted in the rational structure of reality that the logos imposes. In this sense, Chrysippus returns ever to Heraclitus's uneasy tension. Change is real, but it is not chaos. There is order amid change, and this order is knowable and actionable. Ethics, for Chrysippus, emerges from this architecture. The good life is one in which a person's judgments align with the way things actually are, the inevitable, rational order of the universe. Virtue is the sole good, and external goods, wealth, status, pleasure, are preferred only insofar as they are in harmony with nature and with the logos that governs all. Human freedom, then, is not about rebels against fate, but about the proper use of reason to live in accord with the rational order. The Stoic sage, in Chrysippus's view, is not a passive acceptor of fate. He is a rational agent who recognizes necessity and acts in virtue within it. Chrysippus also wrestled with the perennial problem of opposites, a problem that Heraclitus announced and that many later thinkers found perplexing. The Stoic solution is subtle. The apparent opposites can be reconciled within a single, coherent system of causes and signs under the guidance of providence. Change does not undermine identity. Rather, it reveals the strength and resilience of a rational soul that can maintain virtue even as circumstances shift. Legacy and influence. Chrysippus's work did not merely preserve Heraclitus's insights. It extended them into a mature, teachable doctrine that could address metaphysical questions, ethical dilemmas, and the practicalities of daily life. The Stoic system, logic, physics, and ethics integrated into a single framework, became the intellectual backbone of later Hellenistic thought and a major influence on Roman philosophy, Christian theologians, and medieval scholars. The way we today talk about rational order, natural law, and the idea that the good is aligned with the structure of reality owes much to Chrysippus's enterprise. Notable patterns across these three proponents. From intuition to architecture, Heraclitus's sense of ever-changing reality was not abandoned. It was incorporated into a larger architecture of rational order. Zeno emphasized the order. Cleanthes offered a divine reading of that order. Chrysippus built the systemic tools to make sense of that order in logic, ethics, and physics. The logos as unifying concept. Across Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus, the logos moves from a vague principle to a concrete, intelligible authority. In Zeno's hands, logos becomes the guiding rational structure of nature. In Cleanthes, it becomes a divine, personal force. In Chrysippus, it is the formal principle that grounds logic, science, and virtue. The concept allows Heraclitus's flux to be reconciled with knowledge and agency. A practical philosophy of life. Heraclitus's insight becomes a guide to living, how to think, how to feel, and how to act in the face of change. The Stoic line transforms philosophy from a pastime of questions into a discipline for shaping character, cultivating resilience, and engaging with the world in a way that respects the order of things. Interplay with later philosophy. The Stoics' elaboration of change and reason would echo through Roman moral philosophy, Christian theological reflection, and medieval natural philosophy. The portrait of reality as an ordered universe, where human life is measured against the grain of a rational cosmos, becomes a durable legacy of these followers. A closing reflection. The continuity from Heraclitus to the Stoics. Heraclitus's insistence that everything flows presented an immediate challenge. If all is changing, what can endure? The Stoic response, embodied in Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus, does not pretend that change ceases. It asserts that change, panta occurs within a rational, knowable framework. The cosmos is not a theotic chaos, but a living, intelligible whole. The human life that best mirrors the cosmos is a life of virtue, guided by reason, aligned with the logos, and oriented toward the good. This is not an abandonment of flux. It is a disciplined, mature confrontation with flux, a flux that reveals its shape when observed from the vantage point of nature's law. In Chapter 7, we have traced how three eminent interpreters, Zeno of Citium, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, took Heraclitus's seed and grew it into a tree. The leaves are the practical wisdom of a life well lived. The branches are the diverse inquiries of logic, physics, and ethics. The roots are a shared fidelity to a rational cosmos. They did not merely follow a master. They expanded a theory to meet the needs of a world that demanded not only to be described, but to be understood, navigated, and enriched by human virtue. If Heraclitus opened a window onto perpetual motion, his successors built a house in that light, a house designed to shelter the fragile life from the tempest of fortune, while remaining true to the idea that there is an order in which we can place our trust. What remains for the reader of this chapter is to carry forward the question Heraclitus first posed. How does change inform wisdom? And how can we live in a universe that shifts without losing its shape? The Stoics answer with a confident, comprehensive system that makes Heraclitus's fire not a mere symbol, but a driving force of a reasoned, purposeful life. Notable proponents like Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus show how a philosophic intuition becomes a rigorous doctrine, and how a single principle, change, can illuminate a spectrum of human concerns, from the mind's clarity to the soul's resilience, from the city's law to the cosmos's law. Enduring influence aside, the study of these figures is a reminder that ideas not only travel, they grow. Heraclitus's river does not stand still. It invites us to step in with care, not to be overwhelmed by the current, but to learn how to swim with purpose. Through his notable followers, Panta Rei ceases to be merely a provocative maxim and becomes a living pedagogy, one that teaches us to find order in flux, virtue in motion, and rational calm amid the inevitable tides of change.